Welcome to the M3 BearCast. My name is Malcolm Travers. Male Media Mind is a grassroots organization dedicated to uplifting and unifying our community through dialogue, insight, creativity, and knowledge. And on this show, I try to break down topics that I do on my live streams and go deeper. A lot of times those topics are around spirituality, relationships, mental health, personal development, or anything that could use a different perspective or some experience. And I try to go deeper on the podcast and explain why I talk about those topics. I take excerpts from the live stream and maybe give added context and explain why I chose those topics. And I'm pulling two excerpts that are around the same topic, dealing with capitalism and mutual aid. The first one was from a content creator who talks about the idea of slop, economic slop, in the sense that capitalists intentionally trying to make products, services, information, communities that are of lower quality so that they contain all of the resources to continue their capitalist homogeny. And how Americans, especially in modern day global supply chains, have accepted lower quality goods. And in the second topic, I'm going to break down the idea of mutual aid built into society versus organizations and systems that are designed to aid those who are less well off, disabled, or in need of help. So my first topic is on capitalism and slop. And I played a video during the live stream that I will play in just a moment, but I wanted to contextualize what it was dealing with. We were talking about the tariffs that were being waged. Many of them have been dialed back since we made this recording, but the underlying assumption of placing tariffs on foreign goods, the rationale, which I don't believe in, but was stated, was that foreign companies were flooding our markets with low quality goods at cheap prices that priced out American products. Now, part of the emptiness of that argument is that certain goods that are made overseas are made so cheaply that Americans would not be willing to purchase them if they were made in the United States. We've gotten to the point where low quality goods are just goods. We don't consider them low quality anymore. And I wanted to question that assumption. How and why have we started to accept the fact that the goods that we buy are going to be of lower quality, and that, in a sense, we have bought in to fast fashion, fast food, fast products that break and have to be replaced frequently? There was once a time when items were prized for their longevity. One of them that really stuck in mind to me was the Maytag brand. They went out of business and they were bought up by another company. I can't remember which. I think it might have been GE or Whirlpool. I'm not sure, but another American washing machine company. And it had to do with the fact that Maytag brand products had customer loyalty, but they didn't have the sales that other companies had. And that might have been even between American companies, not to mention companies like Samsung, a Korean company that is known for higher quality goods, but also they're made cheaper as well. And I think at a certain point, we valued the initial price of an item over its longevity, especially if we knew that there was a consistent supply of low quality goods that served our purposes. So like, I think certainly a washing machine lasting 20 years is nice, but if you can get a new, updated, modern washing machine every 5 to 10 years, I think people kind of enjoyed the upgrade. And we got used to the subscription model of things, of upgrading every few years and not holding on to items for a very long time. Now, that's not true of every area of our life. There are still items that are considered luxury items or designer items, jewelry, designer bags and clothes, which are considered almost investments at times, and they're meant to last for a long time, but they also are very expensive. Those items themselves are not doing well in the market right now. So let me go ahead and play the video. I'm going to start off thinking about something very serious, and is really dealing with capitalism. And the idea came up when we were thinking about tariffs and Liberation Day. We're putting all these tariffs on all these countries. And it occurred to me that there was once a point when American products were considered higher quality than those
Yes.
that we imported. And I'm not sure if the quality of overseas goods got better or if we just got used to it being lower quality or some
Mm.
combination of the two. But this guy got me thinking about it. It's like, there is a portion of the world and myself that has gotten used to just lower quality goods. And he was like, that is by design. I want
Yeah.
to get your take on his take, and we'll talk about it.
I've been wondering lately why everything sucks, and I think it's because it's supposed to suck. The fundamental substance of our economy and society right now is slop, and that is on purpose. Because what slop does is it helps the rich get richer, and it keeps you in your lane by denying you access to quality information, quality capital goods to build a business or do whatever, and quality kind of situations and social contexts to like form solidarity. Slop is a method to keep power. If you look at American society from this perspective, a lot starts to make sense. Fast food, which is the culinary equivalent of slop, it isn't just that it's unhealthy, it's that it comes in and replaces what used to be like a local foodway, connections between people or connections between people and nature, with a system that connects the individual person through their money to like a massive multinational corporate entity. Money becomes the only interface that you can use to interact with the world. It used to be that trust and like community bonds were an important kind of currency that people had. Their spiritual connection to each other, to a higher power, to nature was another kind of currency to persuade others to do something with them, to try and make a living. But now it's literally only your relationship to these large systems that operate at such a scale that nobody really controls them. And the thing that mediates that relationship is your dollar. By reducing the scope of the lives people can live, they reduce the chance of resistance to the regime, and they reduce the value kind of being taken out of this shadow cloud economy and being put back into the real world. And the way you reduce the scope of a life somebody can live is by feeding them slop, so that culturally their horizons don't extend. They never see great art. They never get educated because they're using AI to cheat on all their tests. They never are actually able to get good capital goods to be an entrepreneur because all the capital goods are slop. They're never able to get good services to support their business because everything is slop. And they're never able to like make strong community bonds that would fuel their own power because their community has been destroyed. And the only interface is the dollar, and everything is slop. So how to resist this? Because it all sounds pretty apocalyptic. If they want to make you as small as possible in order to control you and in order to keep you from producing value, then what you have to do is commit to making yourself as big as you can. Learn new things, take on responsibility, and accept dependence in equal measure. Put yourself in situations where you can fail and grow, because they're betting that if they can keep people from growing, if they can make that voice inside of your head that says, no, don't try, that's embarrassing, or that won't ever work, if they can make that voice as loud as possible, they win. And so don't let them.
So I thought this came out last night, when you were talking about the woman being comfortable on $1,000 a week. I thought about that term comfortable, that comfortable is a trap, because I think a good life has in equal parts difficulty striving for something. If you're going to obtain some sort of business or something, or create value, as he was talking about, as an entrepreneur, there's no comfortable in that. And
Right.
part of that means struggling, not necessarily financially, but like energy wise, mentally, trying to learn something that's difficult to understand, facing resistance from people who don't want you to disrupt their industry, whatever it may be. Like, people don't like competition for the most part. I thought
Definitely.
about that when starting this channel. Like, a lot of people didn't realize that we, as much as we are competing for other people's attention on different shows or whatever, more people in the same space usually expands that space, at least when it
Yes.
comes to content creation. And like, a lot of people initially did not understand that. And so people initially would be resistant to collaborations. For me, as a content creator, one of the most difficult things is criticism. Like, for me, I have a thin skin. I really do. And I'm trying to get better at it. I have gotten better at it. However, one of the
Most
major
definitely.
ways that I do get better at it is just to not pay attention to it. But once in a while, I'll get a message. It's like, I'm not interested in anything you have to say. please don't message me ever again, something like that. It stings. I'm like, God damn. I'm like, okay.
I would have preferred you call me a slur or something. It's like, damn.
I mean, they were not rude. They were very direct, and it
Mm,
stung. And I was like, fuck. But that is
wow.
part of life, like the pain
Yeah.
part. And I think
Yeah.
capitalism in general is this idea of let's make it as easy as possible. Let's reduce the friction of getting your food. Like I was talking about, fast food delivery
Mm,
is a blessing and a curse because if I just slightly don't feel like cooking, a couple taps on my phone, and they're trying to make it
exactly.
easier than that. They would just want me to talk to it. Say, bring me some
Right.
the same
I
thing
ain't
you
got
brought me last week.
I can lay in my bed. I can like just grab the phone, do this a couple of times. I have a hot meal being hand delivered to somebody. I ain't got to get dressed. I ain't got to shower. I ain't even got to pull out my wallet. Like it's all
Exactly.
right
But
there in the palm of my hands. Yeah.
unfortunately, it's a trap because they're extracting more money out of you by doing that. And
Mhm.
one of the things he was saying is also this idea of the more you sink into capitalism is realizing that money isn't the only capital you have, right? So
Right.
when people go online and make an ass of themselves for money, they don't realize that there is a such capital as reputation, as
Mhm.
dignity, as your soul. If you're a liar and all you do is make content that makes people upset, like you've corrupted your soul and you don't even recognize that you've given something up. Capitalism is the prevailing way in which we exchange value.
And I hate to say
Yeah.
it, looking at Elon Musk when he was forced to buy Twitter, I'm calling it Twitter, folks. And yeah, I mean, there probably wasn't a lot of money to be made in acquiring it, but look at what he has acquired. Look at what he got out of it. He basically, it's funny because I saw the other day somebody said he's now the most followed person on Twitter. Gee, I wonder why. Because he owns the damn thing and he can push the levers and do whatever he want to do. It's, wow, I'm showing up on everybody's feed. How did I do that? I must be really smart and I must be really entertaining. It's no, but you own the thing. You can do with it what you want. You can gather all this information. You can control the narrative.
Yeah.
And so you're right. Like it, yeah, he's not making a lot of money off of it, but again, it's not always about the money for him. So
There are
yeah.
other forms of capital. There's reputation, there's
Yeah,
social
exactly.
influence. Yeah. Even if it's a negative sense right now, he's definitely made its mark on the world. I think a lot of
Mhm.
people, like I said, I had a family member honestly did not recognize that he's not the vice president. He just assumed, but it's like the vice
That's
president.
that's so cringe, but that's true. It's
Yeah,
like,
no one elected his ass,
no,
but he's
and I'm
basically
tired of
the
seeing
de facto vice president right now.
I've seen him do more stuff with Trump than Vance has. So
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, people look at him like, are you the de facto vice president or are you the president? We're rolling with that for a while there, calling him President Musk. Yeah.
yeah,
But it's just terrible. But
yeah.
no, that guy is right. It's I have noticed that too, that the quality of goods has just gotten worse and worse. And so it's like you said, is it really just has it gotten bad or are we just used to are we used to things getting worse and we're just kind of oh
We can
this
get
is
more.
great.
We used to I do remember this, actually having a conversation with a relative about this, about clothes, and
Mhm.
particularly like clothes that you could own for decades. She's I've had this suit for 20 something years. I wore it to my wedding. I had this, and I'd be like, yeah, okay. But I got this one and I can get three more before that one runs out at the same price. At a certain
Mhm.
point, when you recognize that you can buy cheap goods and they're the items themselves are disposable, you start thinking in that terms. And the first time I've heard of that being explicitly cast in that way was what people call Shein hauls. Those
Mhm.
videos where people would show what they got from Shein, and most of those clothes would disintegrate after a few washes. Very rarely did they survive a year.
Yeah,
It
they're not
was-
designed to. Yeah.
and
It's the same with and this is a thing that
yeah,
I keep hearing about. It's like with appliances and things like that. There was a time in this country where, you know, you bought something and it would last forever. And if it breaks down, you could fix it. Manufacturers now are making things that if they break it's almost impossible for you to fix it.
Fix it.
And
Yeah.
so the goal is, why would we make all these extra parts for you to be able to fix it when we want you to just buy another one, buy the newer model or whatever? So it's like they purposely make it difficult to fix because they don't want you to fix it. They just want you to
Right.
buy a new.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny thing is, the companies that tried to go against that grain went out of business. The
Mhm.
companies that tried to insure their products and say, yeah, it'll last you a lifetime, there's no money in that for them.
No,
So,
no.
because now capital is really the only thing. It used to be your reputation, the fact that you
Yes.
own this thing, you felt proud about it. You said, yeah, I've had this thing for 20 years. You had memories with it. You actually care. You were like, yeah, yeah, no one cares. They don't care anymore.
Exactly.
But, what he was saying, the antidote to that is making yourself a little bit uncomfortable, finding something you really care about. He called it as making yourself bigger, ways that you can be interdependent and be dependable to other people in ways that are not necessarily financial. With your time and your energy, your attention, that's part of why I was bringing this up, is because I feel like the economy is collapsing in front of us. Not even in slow motion, but like
Mm,
it's collapsing. The goods are likely to rise in price by 10% or more.
yeah.
A large percentage of people are going to be without a job and probably unable to find a job for a period of time. Unemployment is fairly low right now, and it's not going to remain that way. And with that, fewer jobs, more people looking for jobs, meaning people are going to accept lower paying jobs where goods are going to cost more. And it's just like how you're going to be able to deal with that. Part of it is being interdependent with people. Say, for instance, you lose your job and you don't have enough money to make it over a period of time. Do you have a backup plan for living conditions, or do you have a place to couch surf? That's a real
Yeah.
thing. Like, do you have enough savings to, or other capital, even if it's not money, like reputational capital? If you asked for a favor from someone, they would take it considerably more
Yes.
serious, because
Right.
he never asked for shit.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's a form
That's
of
the way I
capital.
try to be. That's why
Yeah.
I try to be. I'm like, I don't try to ask for nothing. But when I do, it's damn, you don't never ask for that. You really must need this.
Exactly. That is a form of capital. Your
Mm,
reputation is like, yeah, he doesn't lightly ask for anything. So if
right.
he were to ask me for something, maybe I'd be more likely to give it to him, because I know that I want to save that for when I really need it. Or
Exactly.
do you have the disposition, the personality to accept rejection? I think that's one. If you were to ask someone, because I think Greg and I were talking about it one of these other days, where someone asked him for something and he said no, and then they yell at him. He's like, "Fuck you, you son of a bitch! I didn't want that for you, no." Like,
I think we all have experienced that at one time or another. It's just, well, thank
okay,
you for making it easier for me to say what I said then, because now you definitely ain't getting shit.
yeah, those are real situations, but
Mm.
yeah. So I'm thinking about that and putting a thought and a prayer for those who, as our economy dissolves in front of us. So, for my next topic, I want to discuss the concept of mutual aid. And this is an idea that also comes from the sort of socio-political environment that we find ourselves in, and the idea that the federal and many state governments are likely to dismantle social safety nets for people. And I saw this video of a young man talking about his time living in Rwanda and a teaching program, and some of the things that he observed while he was there. And we started to have a deeper discussion about what mutual aid would look like within the United States. And I don't think it can look the same as it did for him in these other countries. So we started making our way back to the church. And there have been discussions about the fact that in my own life, a church that I once attended is still considered my church, in the sense that the people who I met while I was there are still in my life, and I have solidarity with the people there, even if I don't maintain their beliefs. And I also strongly believe in the idea of community outreach, and there are very few local organizations that pride themselves on doing community outreach as a part of their existence. And what does mutual aid look like in the United States? And what can we look for as a stopgap measure for community based aid organizations when federal and state organizations are being starved of their money or outright abandoned? So I will bring you this conversation that I had about mutual aid. I'm doing a little things on the economy and solidarity and things like that because I think we are going into an economic downturn. And I found this video from a young man who spent some time in Rwanda as a teacher, and
Oh,
he was explaining like some of the customs of poverty versus your pride. And one of the things it reminded me of is several people who I've talked to who are from other countries, say Jamaica or we'll say Puerto Rico, Trinidad. One of the first things they noticed when they came to the United States were homeless people. It's like you're one of the wealthiest or the wealthiest nation on earth, and you have homeless people everywhere. Like, what is up with that? And honestly, I didn't understand what they were talking about. At first, they were like, we don't have that issue, even though we have much greater levels of poverty in our country. And it was really difficult for them to understand. And I think this is an interesting story about the same idea in Rwanda. And I was wondering if are there any lessons to be learned from countries that have, I guess, they have a lower level of infrastructure and technology and wealth, but their social intelligence and infrastructure is much more sophisticated, if that makes sense. Like they have
yeah.
found solutions to problems that don't require money or capital goods and things like that. And can we adopt something from them? Okay, let me see.
How does Rwanda care for their unhoused population? It's a very small country, but it's very heavily populated. So you'd think you'd have a lot of unhoused people lining the streets, like you do in a city here in the United States. You do see unhoused people, but it's not as common as you might think. And one of the ways that they keep those numbers low is through house workers. A very common house setup is that you have your main house, and then you have a courtyard space behind it, and then an outbuilding behind that. That courtyard space is where most of your life happens. That's where you cook, where you clean, where you spend your day. And that outbuilding is where you store your food, your charcoal, all of the household goods. And it's very common for a Rwandese person to have someone live in the outbuilding. That person is a house worker. They can cook or clean or wash your clothes, go to the market for you. They have a lot of things that they can do around the household. And when we moved to our site in Rwanda, we were teaching there, we had a lot of people come to us and say, hey, if you need a house worker, here's some people who could do that for you. And we didn't have a house worker for a long time because we didn't fully understand the culture behind it. And then I remember once having a conversation with one of our students, and he was like, why don't you have a servant? And we're like, as an American and as a white person coming to Rwanda and then having an unpaid laborer having a servant, that's not okay. And they're like, why not? Why wouldn't that be okay? And we're like, because it's a servant. And we're thinking like the optics of this class divide. But then we learned that people in our village had started to think that maybe we were a little bit rude, that we had extra space in our house with no one living in it. And that's when we learned that it's actually disrespectful to not have a house worker. And I remember the day that it occurred to us that this is why we don't see unhoused people all over the place. It hit us that when we walk down the street, every single property has at least one house worker. There's at least one person there who cooks and cleans and takes care of the property in exchange for a place to sleep and food to eat. And then having this realization that this is how society has always functioned until we ruined it. That you can have servants' quarters built behind your house where the house workers live, but it's not degrading them. And it's not even really about using them for yourself or exploiting them. Because in the United States, we have a history of people having servants' quarters on their property, but that was always some kind of exploitation. And because of that, when you did see someone unhoused on the street, it was only ever because of a mental health reason. Because there are places for everyone. And it's not these institutionalized shelters where you're just taking all of the impoverished people and shoving them together. No, they're just in everyone's households. But even for the people who do sleep on the street, there is food built into the structure of the town for them. Because in Rwanda, there are fruit trees all over the place. Sometimes on the street that there are guava trees or avocado trees. There's all kinds of food trees. And we observe that there are certain trees that people just leave the fruit. And mostly that fruit is left for the most impoverished children. We would especially see this with guava trees, that I'm not going to go and eat guava off of the tree that's on the side of the road. I'm going to go down the street and I'm going to buy guava from a farmer because I can afford it. So if you can afford food, you buy food. But if you can't afford food, there's not a lot, but there is some for you. And there's this honor system, and it's a very strict honor system that it's bad culture to eat from those trees. Because we had one of these trees that was right across the street from our house. If I went and I started eating from that guava tree, that's just me stealing from starving children. So yeah, I think the approach to the unhoused and to the most vulnerable populations is to incorporate them into society there. While in the United States, often the practice is to try to get them out of sight, to push them into the margins of society. So I guess in their society, it's just more shameful to be selfish than it is to be poor.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking about this. One of the things that, like I said, people who are from other countries who immigrated here were actually shocked at just how many unhoused people exist. The reason why is just because it's built into the culture to incorporate them into your house. Like you have servants, you have workers, day laborers, whatever, where there is not any shame in that work. There's no shame doing that. And it's also one of the things he mentioned is because there isn't the history of exploitation of workers the way that it exists here, right? Like when you have a servant, or if you were to say, I have a maid or a worker in my house, some people are going to look at you like, what? With the incoming recession incoming, one of the things we have to think about is what sort of mutual aid can we provide for each other? And oftentimes I would point people to things like the church, for instance. Though, like a lot of people have a lot of hangups with religious institutions, but I think one of the things that, like, I happen to not have an issue with the outreach that my church does. I've never had issues with the way that they spend their money or how they collect their money. Because we were talking about that meme that you sent about the dude who said lock the doors and we getting some money, whatever.
Oh, the Marvin Sapp.
Marvin
Marvin
Sapp,
Sapp,
yeah.
yes. That would never have happened at my church because all of the donations and the way that the money is being spent is open book. We know from month to month how much is collected and what the money is spent on, and they vote on the people's salaries. There's no way that you're sapping money from the church without people choosing to do that.
Did you say sapping money?
I mean, that is the right choice of words.
That's a good one, though. That's
I don't even know the dude's right. That is hilarious. But there's no way that you're bleeding the church dry for
right.
money without the consent of the congregation. And so I still feel that is a great thing. I saw this one person who they would do a food drive and they would provide shelf stable meals that were basically like canned goods and boxed baking items that you can make. And they had recipes. So it's like you could hand out this bag with a recipe and say, you can cook a meal with this.
Yeah.
And they basically tried to raise enough money through like different organizations like Amazon and Walmart or whatever. You can buy the items and they had them shipped to their house. And then they made these meals and delivered them to different places. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think churches are for.
Okay, so even though I am spiritual, I still claim my church is my church. Okay?
Yeah.
It never will. That's my church.
Yeah,
But
me too. Yeah.
we used to. I don't know if they still do it because the city of Atlanta had an issue with churches feeding the homeless at one point, and they tried. I think they actually did pass a law to make it illegal to do that. I'm not sure if that law is still in effect.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of silly.
Yeah, we used to go out there with like bag lunches and hygiene kits and pass them out to the homeless, and yeah.
So I think their idea was that if you feed them, they'll grow. What is this, like cockroach theory or something?
Yeah.
Right. But that's where we are as a country right now. To need help is a bad thing, and you're a bad person if you're not able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go get a job. They pass all these laws that, like, if you receive government assistance, you can only be on it for a little while, and you got to go get a job and all this other kind of stuff. And again, white people have just taken, I guess, the culture out of it, because you're right. Him being over there in Rwanda. And yeah, the optics would not look good for have this white man be like, yeah, black people, you come work for me for free. I allow that. It's like, yeah,
I'll allow you to live in my house with no free
right, exactly. I'm not gonna pay you, but I got a place out back you can do. You know,
in the house in the basement.
But notice he didn't say that he got a servant. He just said
exactly.
He was like,
but
I think I will abstain from that.
But imagine us being able to do that here. If we have an extra room or something like that, it's like, hey, you can come stay here. I got a place for you to stay. All you got to do is make sure everything's clean and stuff like that. But that would probably do a lot to take care of the homeless situation, because a lot of homeless people don't want to be homeless. They just don't have anywhere else to go. And they just need
I really do feel like this is going to be a thing that's going to happen. And
Mhm.
for people right now, people probably
Yeah.
who are listening to us right now, 6 months from now probably won't have a job, right?
Mhm.
There are gonna be lots of layoffs. Then there's
Yeah.
also gonna be lots of price increases. And so there's gonna be a portion of time where you're between jobs. And
Yep.
how well you handle that is a huge indicator of how well you can pick yourself back up, find a new place to live. Are you going to deplete your savings or whatever financial resources you have at your disposal? Do you have a couch to surf on? Do you have
Right.
a friend? Do you have a family that will take you in during a
Mhm.
rough time? And I think that's important to consider. I know, like, he was mentioning that this applied to large cities in Rwanda, whereas
Yeah.
for myself, I live in a small town. And so it's very common within small towns for there to be networks of friends and family through a church, through school, through family, through tangential relationships where you might take someone in for a few weeks and you vouch for them because you know them and you, I don't know, it's not so much as it was now as it was, say, 20, 30 years ago. But
Mhm.
certainly when I was younger, it was very common for it not to be an issue to have friends of friends who you called a cousin, which they're not really your cousin. They're staying over. They got
Right.
whatever. People just bring you food for no reason. Like it was a really common thing, especially on Sunday. It was just like food. you pretty
Right.
much had you pretty much had lunch and dinner for Monday. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Because people just took care of each other. And
They did.
I think it was because we had to. And we're gonna have to discover that again. I think we are, unfortunately.
There was a sense of community and like neighbors were looking out for other neighbors and things like that. So yeah.
And some of those neighbors were annoying and homophobic and messy
Yeah.
And nosy.
and nosy
It sure was.
as they deliver the food. It's like, but you didn't hear it from me.
Or they'll come bring you a plate just to see what's going on in your house. Like what you
Exactly.
Exactly.
you got going
Exactly.
on? None
They
of your
get
damn
the
Or
business.
better,
local news.
or
That's
better yet, it's like, here's that cup of sugar I borrowed 3 years ago. Oh, girl, what you got going on up in here?
Like none of your business, but thank you.
it's so
Like,
true.
yeah, damn nosy person.
They were definitely trading food for
Right.
knowledge. They wanted to know what's
Exactly.
going on in the neighborhood, so they had clout. Because who's going to
Mhm.
bring you exchange knowledge for food? You did.
I know. I'm about to get me a grill. I'm gonna start grilling some hot dogs. I'll be like, yeah, but I'm gonna bring over hot dogs. Be like, I grilled this hot dog just for you. It's burnt. I know, but I just want to bring it over. So what's going on? What you got going on in here? I'm dying to see what's going on in here. Cause like I tell y'all, my neighbor across the street, she always got some shit going on in her house. I'm dying to see what are you doing, girl?
Oh no, that's too funny. Oh god.
Okay, let's take a quick
Yeah, go
minute
ahead.
about that Marvin Sapp thing. Because he did come back and say, oh, okay, so when you know how they apologize, but it doesn't sound like an apology. It
It's an
sounds like that's
explanation.
yeah, it's not like an excuse for what they did,
Right.
or the reason you have to get out of context. What I was saying was there was certain people online, and then we had this many people in the church, and they all gave this amount of money. We'd make that, but I never. It wasn't my intention to make anybody feel like I was holding people hostage, or that I was
Close
like
the
trying.
doors. Yes, I
Yes.
feel like a hostage.
Now I want to tell you what I heard. I don't know. You heard him say this as well. He said,
Mm.
I asked them to close the doors because it was a distraction for people to be coming in and out when they
No.
Wait a minute.
No, we don't believe you, but okay.
I was
How
like,
dare
that was the biggest
And then he goes and says, you know what, I gave the most amount more than anybody in there. I was like, so you're trying to apologize and defend your actions, and then you brag about you gave more than everybody else, of course, because you know
yeah.
of your status. I'm
Because
just
you
like,
had the most to give.
hey, exactly.
First world problems, dude.
Okay, and that'll do it for this episode of the M3 BearCast. If you enjoyed this program, consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/mailmediamind. There you'll get access to our after shows from our live streams, as well as groups on Telegram. We have a Discord server, and I am always looking for ways to thank our patrons for their support. I'm also doing a book club. Every month I will choose a different book and we'll talk about it in some of the Telegram groups that we have, as well as on the podcasts This month, I'm reading The Let Them Theory. I'm trying to find a fiction narrative that we can derive some conversations about social constructs. I was looking at one. We're still trying to come up with that book to read, but that's the idea, to read books that will further a conversation on a host of different topics. If you would like to support us without a financial contribution, the easiest way to do that is to simply rate and to share this podcast with people. In your podcatcher, you can give it stars, or you can share it to your social media page. As always, I appreciate your support and thank you for listening. Catch you in the next episode.